Technically, no. What happened was Palestine became a British mandate after World War I. Mandate, in other words, conquered territory. Mandate is the euphemism for we conquered this. What the League of League of Nations, which was the precursor to the UN, sanctioned what Britain had done. What happened was at the end of World War II, the UN voted and Britain abstained. Britain did not vote for. They could have vetoed it. They had veto power, so they could have just said no. But they abstained, which then meant that they didn't exercise their veto, even though they didn't exercise a yes. And what the UN did was they voted to then split Palestine into an Israel and a Palestine.
And they could do that because it was technically British, like it belonged to Britain.
Britain did not enforce the split. Britain protested and said, we're against this, we think this is a big mistake. What ended up happening was the British then decided, because they disliked it so much, that they were going to try and prevent Israel and Palestine from forming. The problem is they put their emphasis on preventing Palestine from forming. So Israel ended up coming into existence, and Palestine ended up just disappearing. I mean, in a way, except for the fact that there are 2 times as many Palestinians as Israelis, and this is a long, festering, oozing wound that the world has self-inflicted on itself, because it decided that it wanted to create a state that served only one religion at the expense of the people who were already living there.
I don't understand how they were allowed to make a nation, like just split a nation that was already occupied and put people there.
What do you mean? Do you know where you live? Yeah, there were Native Americans here.
Yeah, but that was the old.
Oh, you mean how could you do it in 1948 in the aftermath of World War II when you would think we would have learned a lesson about doing stuff like that?
Or at least people would object.
There were objections. The Arab world, for example, objected. There were even some European voices that weren't happy about it, like Great Britain. Having said that, the United States and the Soviet Union and France were very much in favor of it. And because they were very much in favor of it, it was hard for anybody to stop it. In 1948, nobody was going to say no to the United States and the Soviet Union. It just couldn't happen. And it was beyond people's comprehension.
Because you never hear about it being a big deal, like when people protest in Vietnam here. You never hear like people protesting the creation of Israel.
There wasn't a mass protest movement in the first world for the creation of Israel. And it was because people had sympathy for what had happened to the Jews, and some people were thinking, okay, maybe if they get their own state, they'll be able to protect themselves. I mean, that's really flawed logic, right? Because if anything, what they've done is they've just sort of located themselves in one place and then put themselves in this really horrible, precarious situation that could potentially put them at more risk, not less risk.
Already people there, like they could have put them in an island or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I get in conversation with Zionists, I have a Zionist friend who keeps saying, well, how much land were the Arabs giving? Why can't the Arabs be generous? My immediate response is, well, why wasn't the United States generous? Why not New York and Connecticut or something? Or New Mexico and Arizona, which were actually asked for. The Zionist movement at one point asked the United States if it would be willing to give up Arizona and New Mexico and create a Jewish state. And the United States said no, but we're willing to let you do it in Palestine. So we're willing to be generous with other people's stuff, but not our own. There's this, it makes me think of this study. I don't know if I'm right about this, but people were asked, and really to do this right, I should ask you, but I'm not going to. People are asked to solve this moral dilemma. So there's a railroad track with people on it working. There are 5 people working on it, and they can't hear anything because they're making so much noise. And they can't see anything because they're facing the wrong way. But coming down the track, headed straight towards them, is a train. And it will kill those 5 people when it hits them because it's going so fast. Having said that, you happen to be right next to a train track lever, and you can change what track the train goes on. And the other track has 1 person on it. So if you pull that lever, the train goes over and kills 1 guy. Do you pull the lever? So answer it. No. There's 1 person saying no, and I see a bunch of people nodding their heads. Any other no's? Are you a no?
Yeah, maybe. Because it would be selfish to do it.
What?
it would be selfish. No, actually, selfishly, I would say no.
You would say no because why?
Because if you pull a lever, you're responsible for the death. If you don't
Of the
pull
one
lever,
person.
right? If you don't pull the lever,
Okay.
destiny isn't.
But just the two of you.
But maybe
Is anybody
yes,
else a no, or is
I'm on the fence.
you're on the fence? You say yes? Yes, 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 yes. By the way, I'm a yes. I'd pull the lever. Okay, so now, most people say yes. The vast majority of people say yes. I'm glad, though, that you had that conversation because it was really good. Now, we're going to change the scenario slightly. Same thing, 5 people, can't hear, can't see, train barreling straight at them. You're on a bridge. I don't know where this bridge came from. You're on a bridge over the workers, and there's a guy standing next to you. All you gotta do to stop the train from hitting those people would be to flip the guy standing next to you off the bridge, because as he falls to his death, the workers will notice and the train will notice, and the workers will be able to get out of their way, and then the train.
Can we throw ourselves?
No, okay. See, okay, so that's, everybody says no, right? And the question is it because you're touching the guy, or is the lever your remote? And people are then asked, and they don't know the answer. I think that's the answer. The answer is you could have thrown yourself. Why didn't you throw yourself? If you're so adamant about saving those 5 guys, why are you sacrificing Bubba here when you could go? And I think that's the real reason the people who said yes to the first scenario say no in the second, is they don't want to die, and it's morally gross to sacrifice the guy standing next to you. But the researchers said they couldn't figure it out. I'm pretty sure this is obvious. I'm pretty sure that's the answer. And that's the thing that I don't get about the United States and our policy towards Israel. Okay, if it's such a good idea, why don't we do it here? Let's give the Israelis a homeland here that'll be Jewish only, and if you're not Jewish, you have to get out. And when you put it in those terms, suddenly it becomes maybe not so desirable. And then the other question is, Palestine obviously had nothing to do with the Holocaust. We're obviously doing this in part because of the Holocaust. Well, why don't we put it in Germany then? Why didn't we carve off a chunk of northern Germany and call it New Israel? Hamburg could have become New Jerusalem, and just give them northern Germany, right? That only seems fair, especially since most of the Jews that we're talking about were either American Jews, and most of them were of German descent, or they were European Jews, and most of them were of German descent, right? There's a reason why Yiddish was the dominant Jewish language in Europe. Yiddish is just German with a Jewish accent and some Hebrew words. And Yiddish is also an awesome language, by the way. Some of the coolest words ever are Yiddish. But anyway, it's a different story.
Didn't they want to be close to Jerusalem and all that stuff like that?
Okay. But then you say, well, so then it's a religious thing, but most Zionists will go, no, this isn't about religion. And it's like, well, if it's not about religion, then why do you want to be so close to Jerusalem? Clearly it's about religion. But then they say, no, I'm an atheist, or I'm a secularist Jew, and I'm a Zionist. And it's like, well, then why did it have to be Jerusalem? This was our homeland. This was your homeland? You're 2,000 years old? I don't understand. Here's the twist. The majority of Palestinians are of Jewish descent and are ethnically more Jewish than the European and American Jews who went and created Israel. So every time a Palestinian is murdered by an Israeli, a person who's more Jewish is killed by a person who's less Jewish. It's true that the Israeli is actually practicing Judaism or is a secular Jew. And it's true that those Palestinians are Christians and Muslims whose ancestors converted from Judaism to Christianity and Islam. But it's just a weird, ironic twist. I mean, it's embittering how ironic it is. It just doesn't make any sense. And here's the problem. And I don't think I said this plainly last time, so I'll say it, and then I'll let you go because I'm way over. But I'm sorry. Let me just do this. The problem is if you said, okay, we're going to create a new state, and it'll be secular. It's not for one religion anymore. It'll be a democracy, secular, and there'll be rights for all minorities. And by the way, Muammar Gaddafi actually suggested calling it Israel, Israel and Palestine, Israel. So, it sounds terrible to me, but whatever. I don't care what you want to call this thing. Call it Israel, call it Palestine, call it Israel, call it Israel, Palestine with a hyphenation like your parents did with you. I don't care. Whatever it is that makes you happy. But if you did it, suddenly there'd be 13 million Palestinians who are Christian and Muslim. I think it's like 10% Christian, 90% Muslim. And then there'd be 6 million Jews. So the Jews would become an instant minority in that state. And they don't want that to happen. That's why they're fighting the Palestinians. They're not fighting the Palestinians because the Palestinians are attacking them. The Palestinians aren't attacking them. They're fighting the Palestinians because they don't want to have Palestine integrated with them because they'll instantly lose their majority. There are actually 7 million Palestinians living in Palestine and Israel. But 5 million are confined to the concentration camp that we call the Gaza Strip. It's just a concentration camp. And then the ghetto that we call the West Bank. It's basically a bunch of little ghetto pockets. And so by doing that, what the Israelis have done is they've created a situation where the natives are in internal exile. Right? They're still in Palestine, they're just not in their homes. Their homes are in Haifa or Jaffa or Jerusalem. And so they're displaced inside their own country as a majority, but with no rights to citizenship. This is like the most nasty thing since apartheid Israel and apartheid South Africa. It might be worse than apartheid South Africa in some ways. In fact it is, when you think about it, because at least in the case of apartheid Israel, there was, apartheid South Africa, there was no blockade preventing the import and export of goods into black neighborhoods, right? Because white people were making money off of the black population, so you wouldn't do that. There was the same mass migration effect, 2.5 to 3.5 million. I just realized something. So I even said this in class earlier. So the history I learned was the largest forced mass migration in human history was South Africa, when it became apartheid, forced 2.5 to 3.5 million blacks to move out of white neighborhoods. And by the way, and Asians too. The Indian population was also separated out. Well, the vast majority of the 5 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip and West Bank are themselves refugees forced out of the rest of Palestine. So that's actually probably a bigger population. Because I would be surprised if it was more than 1.5 million people were actually from those two places. I bet 3.5 million are actually displaced refugees. Anyway, it's not the only refugee crisis we have. We also have now the Syrian refugee crisis and Iraqi refugee crisis. Jordan, the last time I checked, and I don't know how accurate these stats are, Jordan is like 25% Jordanian now. It's something like 60% Palestinian, 25% Jordanian, and the remaining 15% are Syrian and Iraqi. I mean, this is incredible.